Welcome to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the changes and challenges we face and the great things that people are doing to make Greater Portland the best it can be. I'm Christina Egan. Today, we're talking with Siobhán Brett, the opinion editor at the Portland Press Herald. Before she joined the newspaper last summer, Siobhán worked for the national public radio program Marketplace. Many of you probably know it. She has also worked as a reporter for a financial newswire, an international law review, and a national weekly newspaper in Dublin, Ireland, where she grew up. Siobhán brings a fresh perspective to life and culture in Maine. If you have a question today for Siobhán, please call us at 780-4909. That's 780-4909. Hi, Siobhán. Welcome to today's episode of Let's Connect.
Hi, I'm thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you. I'm so excited to meet you. We've been chatting a little bit before the show. I want to know a little bit more about you and how you ended up in Maine.
Right. This is probably the question that has been asked most since I joined the paper, or maybe just since I've been in town. And I wish I had a more exciting answer, but in short, I moved from Ireland to New York City in 2015, and my earliest roommates, by beautiful provenance and very good luck, were Mainers, and we became quite close. I don't have any family in the US at all. Everybody's in Ireland. And so I started visiting Maine early on for Thanksgiving, Memorial Day weekend. And so I was a regular visitor and a long-time admirer of Maine. When the pandemic struck, one thing led to another. I found myself staying in a friend's apartment on the East End in Portland. And I joke that I got the other bug in 2020. And what was supposed to be a 2 or
the not so great bug.
What was supposed to be a 2 or 3 week stay became a 5 week stay, and I put in a little bit of time in Edgecombe. Later that year, went home to my parents' house to kind of take stock. My job at Marketplace at that point had gone fully remote, so I had a chance to exploit that and try on a new living arrangement for size. And so took a look at a lot of different living arrangements and potential options in the beginning of 2021 and landed on Portland.
And what was it about, seeing that the world really was your oyster, you could have been anywhere, what was it about Maine that really drew you to us?
I think there are a lot of parallels between what I would characterize as my hometown of Galway, Ireland, and Portland. They're sort of cobbly cities. They're filled with gulls. They smell the same way. And maybe I didn't know it after 5 years of sort of hustling around New York City, but I guess I was ready for a bit of peace, to kind of come back to the ocean, to come back to hobbies, to have a bit more headspace. It's kind of a corporate jargon term, but if you'd asked me Feb of 2020, do you think you'll be living in Maine and working at a local newspaper in 2 years' time or 18 months' time, I would have said, what?
What are you talking about?
I couldn't have visualized it. And so as much as I loved the pace of life in New York and everything that New York has to give, which is hard to sum up, I guess I was, unbeknownst to myself, ready for a slightly slower, more thoughtful existence, and perhaps also a fresh start. Joining the paper's certainly been part of that.
I like a slow and fresh, but it sounds like a little hint of home is here for you.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, there are also a lot of people whose people come from the west of Ireland.
My people come from the west of Ireland.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's so great. So you were working remote for NPR's Marketplace while you were living here in Maine. What was it like to be a remote worker in Maine but have a job elsewhere?
It was sort of a gradual process for me, with a few fits and starts. I came up for a bit, I left for a bit, I came back up. And Marketplace was very encouraging, I suppose, of it. There was no office to attend in any case. I mean, our doors were sealed shut, so I had no place to go in Manhattan, where I'd been going for 3 years. And at first I kind of couldn't believe my luck that I was managing to do this work while hundreds of miles away, and able to go surfing in the morning and then come in and log on and go meet some friends who I
Wait,
never
did you
thought
say you surf?
I did.
Where do you surf?
Not very well, I
Hey,
hasten to add.
just getting out
But
is it's probably beautiful to get out you do it in the mornings.
yeah, well, we do it whenever the waves look good,
Yeah.
which we're very beholden. It's not. I'm flattering myself by acting as though I'm part of a community of surfers. I'm a very fair weather surfer, and not a very skilled surfer. But yeah, I've spent some time at Higgins and at Pine Point, and
It's so fun.
met a lot of great people out there. The Irish have a kind of a lively tradition of sea swimming, and I've always loved getting in cold water. And I worry sometimes that the neoprene suit is pulling me away from my roots because it's just a little too cozy. But
You should try the polar bear plunge. Have you done that one yet?
no, I haven't. I mean, and let it be said also that the waters of Casco Bay are by some degree colder than the west of Ireland because of something called the Mid-Atlantic Drift, where we have essentially a tempering kind of system coming up from the Gulf of Mexico that keeps everything pretty mild. It doesn't freeze very much in Ireland, and the water, as a result, is also a bit more temperate. Anyway, I digress. Working remotely, I felt like I was gaming the system, and it felt great to be able to, on one hand, upend and totally transform my life, and on the other, do nothing professionally different. But as time went by, the novelty of having kind of one foot in and one foot out started to wear off for me a bit. I think staying with Marketplace was making me feel as though I may be called back, or I needed to get back at some point. And to be
So you
perfectly
could
honest,
totally put roots here because you didn't know when you have to go back to New York City. Is
that's
that
right.
how you feel?
Yeah, that's it exactly. I also I'm a social person, and I got into journalism to be around other people, and so it was unusual then to do the work alone in a living room or in a cafe or occasionally on the beach.
Yeah, Zoom
on a
just doesn't
hotspot.
give you that like great, feeling of being part of something, being part of a team. I mean, I think we all did the best we could.
Right.
Those of us who had to work remote during the pandemic, but it's lonely.
Very much.
Takes its toll.
Very much. And spending 5 days a week in the fold of my computer, despite having situated myself in a place that I could tell I wanted to get to know better and to deepen my relationship with, started to feel frustrating. And so I can't say exactly when I wondered about another way or contemplated looking around at some local opportunities, but I did start looking at the Press Herald's career opportunities section on its website. And, one day I saw Sports Reporter, knew I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Would like to think I could, but I suspect I just couldn't. City Hall Reporter, again, I doubted that somebody without a good basis in everything that's been going on in recent years could do that job. And I guess I went on one day, a few weeks later, and there was a different job open, and it was opinion editor. And I did some mental bargaining and kind of thought to myself, okay, well, maybe if this job's not about me and it's about everybody else, well, it's not so unusual for me to throw my hat in the ring. And so I threw my hat in the ring.
That's great. And you had editing experience already. And,
Right, yeah.
it's such a great way to get to know Maine, too, through the editorial page, because you start to hear all the different voices and get to know the different people that are contributing to how the state's future is going to be shaped.
Yeah, I can't think of a better crash course. It feels like an advanced degree. My inbox each day, I've got different views, different themes, new pieces of information, personal storytelling, all kind of, crushing in.
That's great. We're going to talk in depth about your new job pretty soon, but I want to know, just to finish up the first part of the conversation, so you were living here, working remote, but now you live and work here. How does it feel?
It feels better.
Yeah.
For me, I understand that a lot of people really have no problem with remote work and maybe do as sort of a bit of compartmentalizing. I live alone and I don't have children, don't have a cat or a dog. The remote work didn't sit well with me personally, but also I knew that it was holding me back from feeling as though I was going to kind of double down on Maine and to actually try to be a more active member of my community, to meet more people, to attend more events, to live in the world, and to. I mean, a lot of people don't mind so much what's going on in the town that they live in, or perhaps like I think it's sometimes when I speak to my peers, I'm surprised, by like a lack of engagement in local affairs. I'm not necessarily talking even about politics, but just
being involved in the community,
just
being
what's
part
happening,
of,
and how are people feeling, and where are you in that mix if you're in it at all. And so taking the job allowed me to sort of maybe expedite a little bit of my desire to be involved in the city and in the state, and it just feels more conducive to the lifestyle and to the level of commitment maybe that I hoped to bring to this move, which, as we just talked about, was totally unplanned and has worked out well.
For a long time, I had a hard time finding a job in Maine. I was living here, but I was working elsewhere in Boston. And I felt like when I finally found the job at the Greater Portland Council of Governments, where I now work, my life consolidated. It was like, okay, now I can be in one place. I can focus on the people right around me. I can focus on my job. And it felt so great. Yeah. So we're so glad to have you here in Maine, Siobhán. It's great to have you added to this community. And you're listening right now to Let's Connect. And I am talking with Siobhán Brett, who is the opinion editor at the Portland Press Herald. And you're listening to Let's Connect, which is a show about the issues we face in Greater Portland and the movers and shakers. And I'm talking with one of them today who are leading the way. I'm Christina Egan. And if you have a question for Siobhán, please call in at 780-4909. So, Siobhán, I want to go back to kind of your introduction to Maine. What did you find surprising about being here?
I don't want to over-egg my early visits and sort of what they taught me or showed me about Maine, but I owe it to a number of very good friends who I, as I said at the top of the conversation, was visiting with often, for giving me a pretty good grounding in all things Maine prior to arriving. So I did not feel as though I was venturing into the unknown by any stretch when I came up here. I felt a level of familiarity. When I told my parents that I was probably going to stay, they're back in Ireland, they kind of said to me, "Wow, Maine? You don't want to go to DC, or you don't want to go to LA? Have you thought about Boston?" And I said, "No, I haven't thought about any of those places because first of all, I had a kind of pre-existing network here, which is an important thing to highlight. And when I talk with a lot of people who are new to Portland, they say to me, 'Gosh, you seem to know so many people. You seem to know so much.' And I cheated. I really do mean that. I do mean that because I think people can look at an individual and think, oh wow, they assimilated so quickly, or oh they seem to have a full schedule. How did that happen? If you just up sticks and you start over. And for me, Maine drew me because of some existing personal connections, but also because I in 2015, 2016, 17, when I started to come up for those earliest visits, I felt a tie, maybe because of some parallels with Ireland in appearance and tone and the warmth of the people and the priorities that I feel Mainers have, and the attitude, the kind of warmth but healthy remove that can kind of characterize a lot of the ties.
Yeah.
That all
There's a lot of self-sufficiency here, but always a willingness to help your neighbor.
Yes,
which is a beautiful combination.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think a lot of pride, which is something I don't know if I don't know that the Irish necessarily have that clearly, but there's a certain identity which I think I found to be uncomplicated and for the most part appealing. Yeah, so that drew me in, and I was curious. I guess I was curious to know. I mean, New York is almost not even like the United States. It's so much its own beast.
Oh, yeah. And that's true. I mean, United States is just so big that like we're like many nations together tied under one umbrella. But so, it's great to have people that want to move to Greater Portland. I mean, the Irish came here a long time ago during the potato famine. That was like my people who came here. And you're a newer Irish arrival, but we also have many asylum seekers who I think have personal networks here that have been coming. And I remember reading a great column that you wrote in the Press Herald about welcoming kind of this new group of people to help build Maine's future. So tell us a little bit about how you feel about immigration and its impact on Maine.
Mm. I think about this very often because I think it's one of the issues that our readers are thinking about most. And if you live in Portland, you're thinking about it a lot too right now, because I think the city is kind of facing a turning point and finds itself in a bit of a crunch. The column that you're referring to, yes, I wrote it on foot of an event that I attended at the Maine Irish Heritage Center. I was born to Irish parents in Alabama, and I made a little joke in the column about being an anchor baby, which is a Trump term. Back in the 80s, it was easier to find your way in the States. My parents were, I'm not for a moment likening them to asylum seekers or refugees. They were economic migrants, certainly. They left Ireland in their mid-20s because they had no work.
Needed jobs.
And I ended up having an American upbringing that was very fruitful, very positive, and those 10 or so years for my family were very constructive years and provided them with a lot of choice and gave them a real leg up. But also, and we hardly have time to go into it, but it wasn't always straightforward, and the communities and the connections that they forged, often in Alabama and later in Connecticut, were sometimes with other immigrants, other outsiders, people who had kind of freshly arrived and were trying to figure things out. I really believe, I mean, here in Maine, at the moment in 2023, we see such a kind of a tough situation going on with the labor market. And we also see an aging population, the most rapidly aging in the US, or so I've heard.
Yes, we have the distinction of being the oldest nation and probably the most rapidly aging in the nation.
And so there is a need, everyone seems to be clear on the fact that we need people who are young, vibrant, willing to work, able to work, interested in an array of different roles in the local economy and our society at large. And yet there's this sort of mental block of us and them. And I struggle with the us and them because of my own personal experience, really, I guess. The fact that I was born here by chance and the benefits that accrued to me as a result of that, which brought me back here in later life. I was 26 when I moved back to New York City. I bear 2 passports. It's complete luxury and it's luck. But other people aren't so lucky. However, America has plenty of opportunity and plenty of space and plenty of need.
We have so many jobs that are open right now in Maine, and if it weren't for people coming here from other parts of the country and other parts of the globe, we would be losing population because we have such an old population that more people are dying than are being born. So it's actually been a lifeblood for our economy.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, I do think about that a lot, and even though I know that there's a lot of goodwill, I think that something continues to cut through in Maine, the terminology from away.
Yeah. I think it's starting to drop. Like less people.
You do?
Yeah, I think so.
That's interesting.
It's still out there,
yes,
but I think there are enough people that from away it really makes you feel like that other. You use the words us versus them. It makes it them. I know I felt that a little bit when I moved here. I was drawn here by a person. You were drawn here by a network, and I was drawn here by the love of my life, and was from away. And now I feel very rooted in Maine. I can't really imagine living anywhere else. And I chose Maine because of him, but also because I fell in love with the state just like you, coming up here for holidays and seeing what it was like and meeting people that were just so nice, good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I don't want to make too much of the terminology, but I think that we sometimes use language to make distinctions that militate against us. And I know that Maine can benefit from, if only it was up to us to get it right. Unfortunately, it's a federal matter, really. But I think what's going on right now in Portland is a good example of pulling together efforts in a new way to confront a kind of a new moment and a really, really, really significantly changing community. It's been going on for years, of course, that people have been arriving to Maine from all parts of the world and good, but I think now we're recognizing that that's happening both more and is asking more of us as a result. So,
asking more of us and also offering quite a different opportunity for the future, I think, for Maine that's been struggling with a rural economy for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm talking right now with Siobhán Brett, who is the opinion editor at the Portland Press Herald, and you're listening to Let's Connect. I'm Christina Egan, your host. And Siobhán, I'd like to turn to your new job. So first of all, what is an opinion editor? You're the opinion editor of the Press Herald. Tell us a little bit about what that means.
I'll do my best. How should I begin? There are two, well, the bread and butter of most newspapers, it's in the name. It's the news coverage. So they're your front page stories and headlines, reports and features across any beat you can name. My department is divorced from that entirely, and we're in the business of publishing people's perspectives, points of view, ideas, personal accounts, histories, things that ideally conflict and clash, presenting a cross-section of perspectives that ideally, again, or I hope, can be representative of our community rather than maybe just representative of one slice or of the most vocal part of that community. So when you think of an opinion page, if you're a regular reader, you don't need me to tell you this, but you've got letters to the editor, you've got op-eds and columns written generally in the first person, where somebody is setting out their stall and making an argument for a particular case, or pointing out something that didn't sit well with them, or asking a question that they feel maybe people haven't spent enough time thinking about. So I had written opinion columns, and I'd been writing opinion prior to taking the job, but I had not worked as an opinion editor before, and it is really kind of certainly it's like no job I've ever done, and has been a unique challenge.
What makes it different from writing a column to figuring out what you're publishing of different people's opinions? Like, how does it feel so different?
When I think about the relative ease of, whether the columns were good or bad, that's for other people to say, but I used to write a little bit for the Times of London while I was in Dublin about things like the president, the race for the presidency, which was in Ireland, even though it's mostly sort of just a diplomatic figurehead type role, as colorful and silly as some of what we see going on here in the US. Or I wrote a kind of a snarky piece about the trend of putting food in skillets and on slates, and like how Dublin just needed to not bother with that, So those sort of straight ahead pieces that I would just sit down and spin up. And occasionally for the Press Herald, now I write too, and have definitely spun up a few silly straight ahead pieces for the paper. That's such a singular personal job, in the same way that when I was a reporter, for example, I would get my assignment, put together the puzzle pieces, go out, complete the piece, and hand it in. And so that's pretty straightforward. As an opinion editor, I start my day by opening up my inbox for the most part and seeing who has contacted me, maybe who has come back to me if I've made a request or if I've invited somebody to write. Reviewing the letters back, seeing what's in there, trying to gauge what's mattering most. I sit down with the editorial board to form, I suppose, the paper's institutional position on the news of the day. And all of these different components are very, very, well, first of all, the vast majority of them are somebody else spinning up a view themselves. And my job is just to facilitate and support that, tweak it, ask questions, try my best to make sure that it doesn't have any factual inaccuracies, and brushing it up so it goes out.
Yeah, I imagine it's almost like a puzzle, like every editorial spread where you're trying to figure out, okay, we're going to talk about this issue here, these letters here, this response to last week's. Sounds actually fascinating. And you said that you were hearing from such a cross section. So what are the issues that are top of mind for the Mainers that are getting in touch with you?
We find ourselves at the moment, and it's my first year in the job, so this is my first legislative session. And
this is quite a legislative session to be introduced to. There is a lot happening in Augusta.
Right. Similar to November, which was my first election session. Of course, these are all firsts.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll be in firsts until July, maybe even later than that,
Yeah,
actually.
because you're what, 11 months in or so? Or?
It'll be a year in July.
A year in July, so a little
just
less.
about.
Yeah.
Just about. There are certain moments that are bad for business, as I joke with my colleagues. Like, the holiday period, people really aren't sitting down to pen a letter to the editor or thinking maybe about something that they are feeling worked up about. But the 2,000 odd bills before the Maine legislature, certainly have made people animated and interested, and bring a lot of different perspectives for and against, depending on the particular question, out of the woodwork.
Housing is such a big issue this year. Are you seeing that coming through?
Absolutely, comfortably in the top three. Even though I hesitate to come up with three, but yeah, housing has been on our minds. I mean, if you were to look at a pie chart of what we editorialized on in the past 8 or 9 months, it's probably the number one issue.
And what are some of the other, if you had to name a second and third, which you just said you didn't want to?
Oh, yeah. No, you got to push, Christina. You're right to push. I think we've seen a good amount on abortion. The aftermath, obviously, of the Dobbs ruling has led to some question marks about what states will do, and of course here in Maine, what Maine will do, and the governor's maneuvers there. We are in receipt of an awful lot of opinion writing on tribal sovereignty, which is an extremely technically challenging question. And despite time and homework that I've gone away and done, I myself sometimes feel ill-equipped to kind of get in and talk about that. But very strong opinions on both sides there, articulated to varying degrees of success, I think. Immigration, which we've already touched on, of course.
Yeah.
Homelessness and housing tied into that, obviously, an increasing population, services being under pressure. Services being under pressure, I think, has really been the story also of the past 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
And when I say services, I'm referring, of course, to things that the state is responsible for furnishing us with, but also to the fact that, the doors of your local coffee shop might be chained at 2:00 with a sign that says closed early today because there's nobody to work. And so as we look around us, a lot of the things that we had come to take for granted in our local economies have kind of had the rug whipped out from underneath them. And I think that that's leading to a lot of interesting conversations.
So, Siobhán, we're just about at the end of our time. I'm wondering if you could sum up very succinctly what your vision is for the future of that editorial page.
I talked a bit about the ideal being a presentation of a cross-section of views. And when I interviewed to take the job, and it was my position then and it's my position now, I expressed a desire to go out and solicit opinions from places that we don't generally receive them or expect them.
Mm-hmm.
There is an inordinate amount of inbound views. We get a lot prepared and sent through to the paper. My phone rings and I have somebody very well able on the other end, ready to give me something to publish. But I want to hear from people who don't necessarily think about sitting down and doing that. And so that's my big mission.
Listening here today, I think Siobhán wants to hear from you. She hasn't heard from you already. So send it in.
Please.
And Siobhán, this has been such a great pleasure. So glad to have you in Maine. I hope you come back and talk with me again. We didn't even get to talk about housing and transportation and climate change. So maybe next time we can do that. And thanks to all of you who've listened to today's show about Let's Connect in Greater Portland. And thanks also to WMPG, who collaborates with the Greater Portland Council of Governments in producing the show. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Connect Radio. Join us next week for another conversation about the great work that's happening in our communities. Actually, next week is all about Augusta. Until then, be kind to yourself and to each other. I'm Christina Egan. See you next time on Let's Connect Greater Portland.